get a lot of inspiration from the people you interview and the conversations that you have. I'm a middle-aged, high-performing executive. I love meeting new people. I'm curious to know their story, what brings them to the table today. We need more women. Finding a job is like a marriage. You've got to kiss a lot of frogs to find a prince. Go through the process and start kissing the frogs. Women tend to look at a job description and say, I can only do 95% of that job description. I probably shouldn't apply. Don't self-reject. Yeah, I've come to the dark side.
In this Sports and Outdoor Mentors episode, I chat with Esther Woollett, the International Business Development Director at Columbia Sportswear. Esther has worked for some of the most iconic brands globally, including Swatch, Disney and Apple, but she decided to give it all up and follow her passion for the outdoors. I love my conversation with Esther as she shared what she learned from her time at brands like Apple and how she applies those learnings to her career in the outdoor industry today. Before we get to that, I have one favour to ask. Less than 50% of people watching or listening are subscribed, so please hit the subscribe or follow button to help us reach more people so that they can also benefit from the valuable insights leader like Esther shares. I hope you enjoy the episode and thanks for your support. Esther.
Hello.
Hi. Maybe before we get into the main questions of the interview, I'm interested, what would you like the audience to be able to take away from the podcast today?
From the podcast that I've listened to, I get a lot of inspiration from the people you interview and the conversations that you have. And it's about how I can apply some of those learnings to my own life. So I hope that somebody listening could potentially hear my story and go, wow, actually, that could be me. If I follow some of the thoughts and ideas from the podcast, not just mine, but a lot of the other podcasts are out there, and there's a lot of good stuff out there, that they can take some of those ideas, those sentiments, and apply it to their own careers and their own life and grow themselves. It doesn't necessarily need to be around career. It could also be personal. Careers suit some people, careers don't suit other people, and it's a very personal journey. So listening to my personal journey, I hope that people sit there and go, actually, I'm a store manager. I never imagined I could get to be a director. How could I make that happen? And to look at the steps in between to really map out that journey and to make that happen for themselves.
So over the last 30 years, when I look at your background, your career path, there are two periods, let's say, where there's one period that you're in now where you're working with outdoor brands, including so Mamut, Timberland, and obviously today Columbia Sportswear. Yeah. But then there's another part, another 15 years where you work for some, frankly, massive global iconic brands, and I don't use that word lightly. So brands like Swatch even, like Disney and like Apple. Yeah. So I'm really interested to know, actually, before those days when you jumped into retail, what were the kind of key defining moments that set you on that path?
I think it probably goes right back to childhood. One of my earliest memories was sitting at a cash desk, counting the pennies. My mum and dad had a stationery shop. They sold greeting cards, wrapping paper, small gifts, in Strood in the Medway towns in the UK. That's one of my sort of very earliest memories. And I always swore that I would never go into retail. Retail is a 7-day-a-week operation. It's hard work. You're constantly having to find the next new thing to attract the customer through the door. It's 9 to 5, often phone calls in the middle of the night because somebody's broken in or the alarm's gone off somehow. So I always swore blind that I'd never go into retail. My mum and dad grew their portfolio of stores from 1 initially through to 5. And so I went away and trained to be a nurse. I did my training, my degree, my learning in nursing, but I never actually practiced. Unfortunately, my dad got sick. He has bipolar. And so I came home to help out in the family business initially. and then realized what I'd left behind, this incredible ability to be able to engage with customers and with the people in your stores, the regulars, the freshness that was coming every day, the deliveries that you would unpack and find something new, the trade shows, and the camaraderie, the community of retail. I hadn't really understood that as a child. And it was something that I then came back and found and observed. And it was amazing. I fell in love with it completely. And so when my dad got a little better, I then looked around to look at how could I build my training. Having never been to a traditional university, never having done a business or an economics degree, how do I learn those things that you need to learn to be able to be successful in business? And at the time, this was in late 1991, early 1992, Euro Disney, as it was then, was just about to open its doors and was looking for an enormous amount of people to come join them. And so I joined a queue of people in a hotel in London and went through an interview process and was picked on their management training program. And I joined Euro Disney. I went out to Paris with a single suitcase on the plane to Charles de Gaulle and did 18 months at Disney, at the theme park, in their management training program, learning everything about how to engage with guests, as they call customers, and really surprising and delighting the end consumer through storytelling and engagement and really making somebody's holiday special, whether that's from loading a ride to checking somebody in at the hotel or selling them a princess dress for their 6-year-old. And that was really where I started understanding the pleasure that it gave me to get up every morning and go in and surprise and delight a customer and make that person feel super special.
Just picking up on something, it's even though there's not an obvious connection between nursing and retail, I think actually the reason why you said that what you missed was that engagement with people. I think I mean, I don't know, but I would also assume that actually nursing, probably the interaction and the engagement with people there is also a pull. So has that connection and interaction and collaboration with people been something that's kind of always been important for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's my special skill. It's something that I get a huge amount of enjoyment out of, a huge amount of energy. I love meeting new people. I'm curious to know their story. What brings them to the table today? How did they get there? What challenges did they face? How did they overcome those challenges? And probably very much like you, Dan, that you enjoy that finding out about somebody's story and understanding what makes somebody that sits in front of you, and then trying to add layers of how can I support that person to be the best person that they wish to be, whether that's through mentorship or through training or through their own personal development journey. Take
a step back again to look at those two contrasting periods of your career. So let's call it the iconic brand period and the outdoor brand period. And now the outdoor brands are going to kill me for saying that they're not iconic, but of course they are in their own terms. What's working for brands like Swatch and Disney and Apple, what were you or have you been able to take away from that and put into action and use in the other part of your career? Yeah, absolutely. Disney's about storytelling, and that's translatable across every aspect of business, whether that's fast-moving consumer goods with Disney. You know, they are churning volume and selling a lot very quickly. That storytelling is really critical to how you engage a consumer and how you bring something new to the market. You know, they are a film factory. That's their special sauce. And on the back of a film, they'll then bring all of that merchandise to life, from coffee cups to duvet sets to
to costumes. And it's about that storytelling that you have with the customer. And that's what really taught me about putting the consumer in the very center of everything you do, because without that consumer, without them purchasing that coffee mug, my salary doesn't get paid ultimately. And that's even true today as a sales director. Unless the consumer purchases the product, then my salary doesn't get paid. So I think that's something that has been a red thread through my career, is putting that consumer first and center of everything that we do to make sure that we are selling out at the end of the day, and giving the consumer something that either they want or need, or to give them something that will create that happiness for them, and to be able to remember that moment, whether it's through a film or through an experience in a theme park. So for Disney, it was very much about consumer. Apple was more about brand. Apple is an incredible business to work for. It's detail-orientated focus, laser focus on its brand is out of this world. And, something that Apple does really well is Apple knows that it rests on its brand equity. Its pure nature of brand is what you buy into, whether that's through your iPhone or an iPad or a Mac or iTunes. Everything centers around brand. And so that's the non-negotiable. And I'll give you a story to try and give you a flavor of what that means. The store in Bristol, we were opening the store in Bristol, and the tiles for the staff toilet hadn't arrived in time for the store opening. We delayed the store opening by 3 weeks in order for the tiles for the staff toilet to arrive from the US and to finish the job perfectly. I can't imagine another retailer certainly one I've never worked with, would delay a store opening by 3 weeks because the staff toilet tiles weren't correct. That attention to detail is something that goes above and beyond. These are tiles for a staff toilet. It means nothing to go down to B&Q and pick something off the shelf that looks about similar. But for Apple, that was not good enough. That's not the standard that was required. So that attention to detail is something that with Apple I've really learned. And being very protective of the brand, because that's your special sauce. That's what you own. So as somebody who represents Columbia, that's the special sauce. That's what I have to own. I have to make sure that I'm protecting that at all costs, because that's what we're selling at the end of the day. We're selling the brand. You can sell a fleece, you can sell a jacket, you can sell a pair of shoes, but what the consumer is buying is the Columbia brand on that product. And that's what I learned from Apple.
Wow, that's amazing insight. I mean, being an Apple geek, and having watched most of their keynotes, I guess I got an impression of that, but to that degree, and even the stories you hear obviously about Steve Jobs, but to the degree that you're describing there it's amazing. And I can imagine on a practical level that's somehow probably quite frustrating in the sense of trying to open a store, but on the other hand, in terms of being proud and inspired for somewhere you work, it must have been like, wow, okay, this is a business that will not compromise, that it has to be perfect. And
absolutely. And I think that's something that a lot of brands forget on their journey, is the importance of their special sauce, the importance of their DNA, the fundamentals that brought them to life initially, is how that brand shows up to the consumer and to the staff and the people that work for it. And if you have that belief and trust to delay a store opening and the revenue that equates and the rents that you then pay in the meantime, the pure ethics of it, you say, wow. Like you say, wow, this was something the brand felt so strongly about that it wasn't compromising in any way, shape or form. My first response was, do you realize how much revenue you're going to lose by not opening the store opening plans, everything builds to that store opening. They're like, no, we won't open. If it's not right, we're not opening. And that's powerful, really powerful as a brand.
Let's now shift a little bit more to the outdoor space. So I guess the first question is, why the outdoor space? Because it's clear, that I guess there's some underlying passion, because it's Timberland, Mamut, Odlo, now Columbia Sportswear. So you're building up a nice portfolio of experience there, as it were. So what's that draw to the outdoor business for you?
Well, it goes back to mum and dad, actually. Mum and dad used to do trade fairs in the summer. So we never really had a summer holiday as such. They were always out in Bournemouth or Manchester looking for the next greatest, biggest thing to hit the shelves. And for the card trade, there's a huge opportunity around Halloween, Guy Fawkes Night in the UK, and then Christmas, and then leading into Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, Easter. So you have a window to purchase everything that you need for your 5 or 6 months of an incredible, intense selling opportunity. So summer holidays were never really a thing for us. Winter holidays, on the other hand, were something that were held very precious. So after New Year, that quiet time in January, mum and dad would take us out of school and we would go skiing. And so I learned to ski when I was 5 or 6 in Liechtenstein, a very privileged place to learn to ski. So my mum and dad took us on ski holidays. And so we'd spend 2 weeks every year skiing as a family. My Fooslap ski trousers, my race medals. That's when I really fell in love with the mountains and with outdoors. And then through my childhood, I was a scout or a Girl Guide, but for international listeners, Scouts, and then into the scouting youth movement and through the Duke of Edinburgh Awards schemes. So that was all about getting outdoors, camping, orienteering, engaging with nature in all of its fantastic forms. And in the UK, there's a lot of wet weather, so you get to enjoy the rain as well. Spending time in the Lake District on my Duke of Edinburgh was something that I look back very fondly of in my late teens. So that's where the passion for the outdoors came. And then as we came through Apple, I was working incredibly intensely for Apple. It was the brand that deserves and requires that attention to detail, takes a huge amount of energy to invest in. And I was traveling very extensively. And I had a little window for a ski weekend with my husband. We were on a ski lift on one of those bluebird days, first lift up the mountain, 8 a.m., untouched powder in front of us. My husband turns to me and says, "You need a job where I can do this every weekend." And I went, "Yeah, I do need a job where I can do this every weekend." And so I spent about 5 or 6 months looking for a perfect job that was within 40 minutes, an hour's drive of some significant snow. And hence I arrived in Switzerland, and hence I arrived at Swatch. So that passion for the outdoors is something that's really been in my bones. And I have to thank somebody called Dennis Middelmerger, who worked at Swatch. And he was one of my architects when we were building stores. And he said, "I've found the perfect job for you, Esther." And I'm like, "Really?" And I'm like, "No." He's like, "Yeah, you have to go for this job. This is yours." And he showed me an advert in German. And I'm like, "I don't speak German. Why would I be interested in this?" He's like, "No, let me translate it for you." And it was the head of retail for Mamut. And I'm like, "Okay, well, I've got nothing to lose. I'll write." So I wrote a cover letter to the HR, and I'm like, "If you're looking for a German speaker, then throw my CV in the bin right now, because I am not a German speaker. I can order beer, I can get home on the train, but I am not a German speaker. But I am passionate about the outdoors. I love skiing with every fiber in my body. I want to be able to do more of that and work for a brand that has that as its DNA." And I was very fortunate that they decided to interview me despite the challenges of language. And Rolf Schmidt took a punt and appointed me as head of retail. And subsequently, I went on to open 35 Mamut stores for them around the world. So yeah, I had some really good times at Mamut, nearly 5 years working for them. And that's where that spark for the outdoor industry really came. That was like, I found my place. I found my family. I found my crew. I need to do more of this. And that's where I then made that mental shift to then start to seek out outdoor companies and work for outdoor companies.
I'm interested. You just talked about a time when you were traveling extensively, when you were at Apple, and you had that thought process, the discussion with your husband on the chairlift. But throughout your career, and I'm sure still today, work is a big commitment. At the same time, I know that you're a guest speaker on a MBA program with a university in Switzerland. You also have 3 kids and are clearly a very demanding husband. So do you have any non-negotiables or any rules that you operate that kind of help you maintain a healthy balance?
I wish I could say yes. Unfortunately, if you speak to my family, speak to my friends, I'm a workaholic, and work has always brought me joy. It's always been a little bit part of my DNA as well. And maybe that's one of my weaknesses, is that my personality is tied up with who I work for and why I work. So I would say I haven't found the balance. I try hard every day to make that balance happen. We do have some non-negotiables at home with regards to trying to eat together in the evenings. That's not so easy when you work for an American company based in Switzerland, because the time zoning means that you're often on calls at 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. But I try and eat with the family at least once or twice a week, and always at the weekends. We always eat dinner at the table. And we always, all of us, put our phones away, so that 20 minutes, half an hour is an opportunity for us to connect as a family. So that's probably a non-negotiable from that aspect. And the other non-negotiable is holidays, is we try and go as a family. That's becoming harder and harder with teenagers, but we'll have to navigate that as we grow older together. But family holidays is something that I feel very passionately about, to bring the family together, and we decide as a family about where we want to go and how we're going to spend that time. And I'll try and limit what I do during the holidays to 7, 8 a.m. when the kids aren't up, or very focused, or only in an emergency situation. So there are some non-negotiables, but I'm not very good at it, Dan. And if anybody's got the special sauce out there to give me the the rules to live by, then I would be delighted to hear them.
Well, I'm definitely not a good person to ask, so maybe let's move swiftly on.
Yes.
So I mentioned there about the fact that you're a guest speaker at an MBA program. So I'm interested how that came about and actually what that entails.
When I was working for Mamut, I had an intern join me, Simon Nuchter, who still actually works at Mamut. And he came and joined us and basically set up the planning and merchandising structure and team at Mamut. When we were building all these retail stores, you need to have that retail infrastructure. And Simon invited me to hear his MBA paper. He was doing his presentation to his tutors and to his peers. And I went along and sat and listened to him present his paper. And during that conversation, the lecturer for that course came and said, "We need more women to speak to our students. Would you be interested in sharing your leadership story, sharing a challenge that you've faced within your working environment to the students, allow them to work independently on that challenge, present to you how they could potentially tackle that challenge, and then for you to present your real life experience of how that challenge went." And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Why wouldn't I want to get involved with young curious, intelligent people who can really bring a different perspective to the table around the challenges I faced as a leader, and to look at it through eyes that perhaps, I'm a middle-aged, high-performing executive. You do things in certain ways. You become habituated to working in the way that you tend to work. So seeing the world and the problems through their eyes is such a fascinating journey. Not all the MBA students are necessarily studying business. Some are studying IT. So it gives a real different flavor to how problems can be tackled. So yes, I've done that now for nearly 7 years and thoroughly enjoy it, get a huge amount of energy out of it.
What do you think? Is there a lesson that you can't learn actually through a classroom or through a lecture theatre, and that you can only really learn with that hands-on professional experience? Is there anything that stands out to you?
Yeah, I think that having that experience in real life, taking stuff that comes off the paper, a SWOT analysis is a good example. We all learn the rote of a SWOT analysis and analysing a problem or a topic through using the SWOT. That gives a flavour, but until you've lived and experienced what you sit on paper through the personal connections, and I'm thinking of an example specifically around partnerships, especially within the distributor world, understanding the challenges a distributor goes through is more than just the threats and opportunities that sit on a SWOT piece of paper with a SWOT on. It's how they actually bring their problems to life and their culture and their learned experience on what they bring to the table. And so that experience is invaluable, and you have to live that. You have to stand in that moment and in their shoes. COVID's a great example. That hit us almost out of the blue. We were all messing around at ISPO going, should we go to the fabric hall because, is it safe for us to do so? And then weeks later, we were in a situation where I was concerned for my job. I was concerned about how I was going to put food on the table or pay the rent. That shift, you have to live through some of those challenging situations to really put to practice the stuff that you read in books. And that's where you really learn how you have to be self-reliant and build your own abilities to overcome some of those challenges. And that's about that relationship, going back to COVID, going back to distributors. It's about picking up the phone and saying, hey, we're all in this together. I don't know how the future looks, but how can I help you help us to maintain a business that's going to exist in 2 weeks, 2 months, 18 months?
Let's maybe pick up on something that you mentioned there. You were talking about your collaboration with your distributors. So if I understand well, until you joined Odlo, you were, let's say, 100% retail focused. Yeah. And then in Odlo, your role shifted a little bit, as it is here, to be more business development focused. Yeah. So I'm interested to understand what did you take away from all of your years' experience in retail that are helping you to be successful in your role today and during Odlo as well?
Yeah, I've come to the dark side. The world of distribution is actually so closely tied with the role of retail and direct to consumer. Both in Odlo and with Columbia, the majority of our distributors sell direct to consumer, either through their own stores, through their own multi-brand stores, or through branded space. So in Columbia stores, we have over 400 Columbia stores worldwide through our distribution network, and through e-commerce. That direct-to-consumer experience that I've carried throughout my career means that I have the ability to speak in a language towards our distributors that they're familiar with. Because going back to the very first conversation or the first question you asked me, putting that consumer first and making sure that consumer has the ability to purchase the product and use the product successfully is exactly what the distributor has at the very heart of every strategy they have. So to be able to help them understand how our products, how our stories will help them sell to that end consumer and sell more to that end consumer has been something that's been very transferable and very translatable between my two hats, if you like. And I hadn't really understood that when I went into Odlo initially. It was something that I was really nervous about, how I could transfer those skills from being direct consumer on the shop floor, more customer facing, to being more stepped back from that. And it's something that I've learned and something I've actually fallen in love with. I didn't think I was going to love it as much. I saw Odlo as a stepping stone to a next direct-to-consumer adventure, and that hasn't worked out in that way. But I did stuff with Odlo that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to. Going to Japan with Zabo as the distributor in Japan, working with Christophe Bezout and Antoine Satik. They supported that journey into Japan, which I experienced a little bit through Mamut, but really extensively through Odlo. Understanding that actually the consumer, no matter where in the world they are buying product, follows very similar style patterns, very similar ways of purchasing, and very similar reasons to buy. They choose the product because it's well merchandised, or it's at the front of the store, or they have their size, it's at the right place, at the right time, at the right price. Those are skills that I learned in my retail days that I could then directly transfer and use that same language within those environments. So there is a red thread from that customer, from being direct to consumer into the world of distribution.
So you've already dropped quite a few names, but I'm interested, is there anybody that stands out in your career as being particularly a strong influence or influences?
Yes. I would say at Timberland, I worked for Michael Stanier. Michael Stanier was and still is one of my key mentors, somebody I turn to very frequently. We chatted a couple of weeks ago about my career and about life in general. He's someone who has very much supported and encouraged me to see opportunity. So I would say that Michael is someone who I would be able to turn to in my hour of need. And he's one of my biggest supporters from a career perspective. He's always encouraged me to think more broadly, not just think narrowly, think about how my skills could be transferable, think about the brands that I'd like to work for. When I was at Timberland, it was one of the things that he taught me was to make a list of the brands that you have an affinity with, that you have a connection with, who you would love to work for. Doesn't matter whether it's in your industry or whether it's outside of your industry. Write the brands that you'd love to work for whatever reason that is. And that's where I got my job with Apple, because Apple was at the top of my list alphabetically. And also from a desirability perspective, if you cast your mind back before iPhone, it was a long time ago, I know, but imagine a day or a year before iPhone existed. Apple were just starting their expansion into Europe and outside of the US. And their flagship store on Regent Street had just opened. And I walked in there as a retailer thinking, how can they have just 20, 30 SKUs? How can they make money with this little amount of stock on the shop floor? Everything was open. I could play with the Macs. I could use the the equipment, and again, this was before iPhone and iPad, so it didn't really exist at that point. You could go into the Macs and type in, into a search engine what you were looking for. They had free Wi-Fi, so you could go in there and use their data. You could go and listen to somebody talk about how to use a photo editing software. That experience took me back a little bit to my Disney days, and that's where I thought, yeah, this is a brand I really want to get to know, really want to work for, really understand. And again, thinking back to my shop fitting days, their shop fits are just beautiful, absolutely stunning, clean, precise, amazing. And so Michael's like, well, list the brands that you want to work for and then find a way how to get that door open. And that's where I then started opening those doors and looking at websites and picking up the phone to contacts and people within my sphere of influence to say, how do I get into this job? How do I connect with the right people? How do I connect with the recruiters to make that happen? There was a couple of other companies on that list, like Lego, like IKEA. Again, very different industries to Timberland, very different backgrounds and consumers. Even consumer segmentation is completely different in all of those brands. But it's a way to think differently about your career. Who do you want to work for? Who do you have an affinity for? Why not research and be curious about what could you bring to them and what could they bring to you?
It's amazing. It sounds like you had from that point onwards at least, a pretty clear plan of what you wanted to do, at least where you wanted to do it. Okay, you said there are a couple of brands that have not yet been ticked off on that list, but nevertheless, you ticked off some amazing businesses. What would you say were the key success factors looking back on you being able to do that? Because, as a recruiter, I know it's not easy to get jobs, especially, depending on the time of the, where we are in the macroeconomic kind of environment. But you've really had a pretty amazing career path. So I'm really interested. Are you able to kind of identify any key success factors that have enabled you to be successful throughout your career?
Yeah, tenacity, not prepared to give up, and being curious. None of those jobs came easily. None of those jobs landed in my lap and went, hey, hello, Esther, come work for us. I've not really had much success with headhunters, and I've found all of the jobs that I've talked about, all of my career, myself. That doesn't happen in a morning. That happens over a period of 6 or 9 months. And there can be days where that's hard work. That dream that you have of working for Apple or Lego or IKEA or whoever you wish to work for, that desire means that you have to push on. You have to figure out a different way. Is your CV the right way of doing it? Are you connecting with the right people? How do I bring the motivation today to get up and to make that difference? And so that tenacity is something that has kept me going. And I've also had an incredible support network behind me. I spoke about Michael Stania. My husband, he is one of my most enormous supporters. He's always believed I can do stuff. Even when the little voice in my head says, don't be so stupid. Why could you imagine working for them? They're not going to be interested in you. He's been the one that says, don't listen to that voice. Listen to your heart and do it. You've got nothing to lose. The worst case scenario is they say, no thanks. You've lost absolutely nothing. And in the process, you've learned something about yourself. You've learned something about the process that took you to the point of them saying no. So use that experience and that desire to move yourself forward. So it's tenacity, curiosity, and never giving up.
You mentioned there that this is a bit of a personal question considering my day job, but you mentioned that you've not had success working with headhunters in the past. So what's your experience been? I'm interested.
Very positive. I've always had great chats with people. I've always had approaches, been approached, had those conversations, but never really got the momentum going. And I'm not sure why that is. I know that from a recruitment perspective, there's a pool of incredible talent out there. So, I'm not always the perfect person that would suit those roles. And I know it's getting harder and harder for headhunters to get their foot in the door with companies. So I think it's just luck almost, is that the right opportunity hasn't come along with a headhunter and a role that I could fit. And it's finding a job is like a marriage. You've got to kiss a lot of frogs to find a prince. And that's part of job hunting. You've got to go out and kiss a lot of frogs. And hopefully you find a prince.
I love that. I'm going to add that to a deck that I share with candidates, because to your point, I always say, finding a new job, it can be a full-time job, and it's hard work. And I think the kissing the frog analogy is perfect. I definitely need to add that into my messages.
Not that ladies need princes to save them. I'll point that out in my feminist streak coming through. But
connecting actually two of the topics or two of the questions. So you gave one person there clearly a strong influence that really influenced, I would say, your career path. And then when we were talking earlier on about the MBA program, you said that you were approached about the fact that they were struggling with female leaders to support them. Yeah. I think all of the names you've given me so far have been men. Why? You're a successful, woman who's has an amazing career. Yeah. But why? What's your perspective around why is that so rare, even in an industry like the outdoor industry, which I think is certainly more open than a lot of more corporate, let's say, industries? Yeah. What do we need to do differently to? Sorry, that's like 5 questions in one.
Yeah, no, I'll try and sort of like corral them into an answer. Columbia is the first place that I've worked directly for a woman. Up until this point, I've only ever had male leaders, and I've only really ever seen men in leadership positions. I think there's the old adage, if you don't see it, you can't be it. And I think that's something that the outdoor industry is better than some. Gert Boyle started this business. She's the epitome of a female entrepreneur, an incredible woman who took the business from nothing into a multi-billion-dollar business that I sit in today. That female leadership within the outdoor industry is there if you look for it. And I think that's something that I admire. And as I say, I now work for a lady, but it's the first time in my career that I've worked for a female leader. If I think back to my Swatch days, though, female leadership doesn't necessarily mean that more women come up through the ranks. There can be this female leadership which tries to push other women away, to put women back down. I'm the woman in my leadership position. I don't need other women around me. Thank you very much. And I think that's something that industry in general can be we need to be a little bit more aware of it. Things are changing, but way too slowly, in my opinion. I think it's something that I have a responsibility for, as do you, as in your other role as a headhunter, as does every leader that sits around a table. We have to put the effort in to make the people that sit around the table more diverse. And that's not just through the lens of male, female, that's also through the lens of religious background, skin color, sexual orientation, everything that makes up diversity, equity, inclusion. We need to be more aware as leaders. And that goes down to things like recruiting. If you only ever recruit through LinkedIn, which is male orientated, tends to be white, tends to be university background backgrounds, we will only ever recruit people that look like us. So how do we make the pool of candidates more diverse in order to be able to bring diversity into leadership and beyond? Because that's something that we have to get better at. And that's going back to that lens of consumer. Our consumers are not white middle-aged men. Our consumers are incredibly diverse. Every aspect of human wonder is represented within our consumer groups. We need to have people sit at the table that look like our consumers. And at the moment, we don't do that very well. And it's something that we have to get better at and start to evolve as part of our leadership journey. And that's something I feel quite passionately about, is paying it forward. How can I support other people to come to the table that could be different? They might not look like me. They might look different. So how do I bring those people to the table, and how do I make them feel comfortable at sitting at that table? Because it's two different things. It's getting people to the table, but then also making people feel comfortable at the table.
Yeah, that's really interesting and surprising and disappointing. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but to hear about, if I read between the lines, experience at Swatch. I hadn't appreciated that, but now you say it, yeah, I guess I can see how that can happen. Yeah, I think as an industry we're getting better, but it's there's still a big opportunity. Let's put it like that. Let's put it like that.
Yeah.
Let's now bundle a little bit all of your experience with all of the different businesses in the outdoors. And if you look back, what has been so far the best and the worst of your experience, your time with it, working within the outdoor industry? I
think they probably bundle together. Like most people that I've listened to, the worst becomes the best, or the best becomes the worst. The worst experience really was when Mamut went through their leadership change. Rolf Schmidt left the business, and Dr. Pabst came in to lead the business, and he brought in his leadership team. And so from one day to the next, I lost my seat at the table, not because my performance was poor, not because of a result that I failed to deliver, but because he had a vision that didn't include me. And that was a huge lesson for me to learn, that it doesn't matter how hard you work, how brilliant your work is, how much you've achieved in any given period. Your work life is fragile, and it can be that you just don't get a seat at the table. And that was the perfect decision for him to bring in his team. He needed a team that he trusted to be able to take the business to the next level. And he didn't know me. He didn't understand who I was or what I was able to deliver. But that meant that I lost my seat at the table. And I went through a grief process, Dan. It hurt me so badly to be not considered within that environment, not seen for my abilities or my inabilities to be able to deliver, but purely because I wasn't the person he needed at that time. That was something that taught me a really interesting life lesson, that you are more than your job. You are more than the title that you have. But it took me 3 or 4 months of grieving to be able to walk away from that and not feel the pain. And I know there's a lot of people at the moment, especially in the outdoor industry, that are experiencing redundancy. And redundancy has this shame, for me, had a shame about it. And I now know that there is no shame around redundancy. You're made redundant for 1,000 reasons, none of which include the ability that you have or what you can bring to the table or the results that you've had in your past. It's a numbers game. And that was something that I had to learn. And that was a really hard lesson to learn. But what I came out with it from was a resilience and okay, well, if that can happen to me, how do I make sure that in the future I'm well placed to be able to make that move more smoothly, with less pain and be able to build my career in a way that I still wish to continue my career. And as I say, I did go through 3 or 4 months of quite being very depressed about it, very down about it. You know, as I say, I describe it almost like a grief. You know, I'd lost a family member, you know, from one day to the next. The people that you laugh, live, work alongside, know their families, know their kids' names, from one day to the next, you aren't in connection with those people anymore. It was a huge shock to the system to do that. So now the thing that I've learned and the thing that I carry now with me is, how do I make sure that I'm making myself future-proof? And that's through learning, it's through reading, it's through connections, it's through curiosity. And I come back to that word quite a few times. I realize that through this interview, is making sure that I'm making the effort to connect with people and to put myself out there and to do things that aren't within my comfort zone, so that if something happens like that in the future, and it may well do, you know, I've sat on both sides of the table, I've made people redundant and I have been made redundant, to make sure that I am in a position that I can say, okay, well, that's today. It's been brilliant, but let's look at the next thing and how I can make sure that my skills are up to date and ready to go, and not be complacent within my role and not sit on my laurels.
It's really interesting. I mean, having also been in the same situation, you know, being in the situation of making people redundant and having been made redundant myself, it completely resonates with me what you say. And not wanting to force you to think about a time of grief, but I think, to your point, a lot of people, unfortunately, in the industry are going through that now. So even though it was a long period of time, 3-4 months, what did you do, what did you do that helped you through that period of grief, if somebody out there is going through that similar situation now?
Be kind to yourself. You know, allow those emotions to surface, and be angry and cry and get those emotions out somehow, whether that's go for a run, learn a new sport, go on an OU course to learn about digital e-commerce, whatever it is that helps you through that period of time. Be kind to yourself and allow yourself that time to come to terms with it. And I know that's a bit passé. It's hard when somebody says, well, be kind to yourself, you know, take a couple of weeks. Yeah, thanks for that. I've got bills to pay and I've got shoes to put on the kids. And how do I make ends meet? And who am I if I'm not a job title? What does it mean for me? Those are the thoughts that go through your head. But it's something that, looking back, was something that was the right advice, even if I didn't take it instantly. I had to work at being kind to myself. So being kind to myself, and then treating the job search as your new job. You know, build that roadmap, build that strategy and that vision that you have. Map out yourself as a brand. Who are you? What do you stand for? What is your special sauce? What is your DNA? Where could that fit? What could you do with those skills that you've listed as your priority? Write 100 words that are affirming about you and your skills and your abilities. Find those words within job adverts. And again, not necessarily in your industry, outside of your industry, and go through the process and start kissing the frogs.
I think that's brilliant advice, and I can only echo it. And it sounds like we went through a very similar process mentally. And I agree, it's very difficult, and it's difficult to take that advice, because I had the same advice and also found it very difficult to take it. So
it is. It's almost impossible when somebody says, take time. You're like, yeah, great. Thanks for that, but I can't take time right now.
We talked a lot about different learnings that you've had, but in many cases, those learnings were somehow forced upon you. Looking back, what would you say has been the biggest learning you've made in terms of reflecting on it as, I made a mistake there. This is a mistake I made, and but this is what I've learned from it.
I think it's a little bit goes along the connections and the personality side of it. Most of my special sauce, my secret ingredient, is the ability to be able to connect with people. It's been a little bit of a shock when I've read somebody wrong or I haven't connected in the way that I thought I had connected. And that's usually through transparency and honesty, which is, things that I hold dear to my heart. I've had to learn the hard way where I've been too transparent or too honest towards someone, and they've used that then to their advantage to drop me in it or to set me up for failure. And that's something that I've had to learn to protect myself. And one of the things that I do now is I use the words, let me reflect on your question and I'll come back with an answer. Because that gives me that space in my head to think about the risk, think about the opportunity, and then to come back with an answer that is more relevant to that situation, to be less, not to have my heart on my sleeve so much. And that can be quite difficult as I've risen through the ranks. That happens more within the leadership environment than it does when I was a store manager. It happens more now, today, where somebody will ask you something and I think it's an innocent question. I'll give a very honest, transparent answer. That then goes away and becomes something very different to how it was said and told, and that's something that I've had to learn, and that's a mistake that I've made. I trust people too much, and so I have to be a little bit more protective over myself and the information that I have. I'd like to tell you everything about everything because I believe that you are a kind-hearted person who will use that for the advantage of everybody. Unfortunately, not everybody sits across the table is as honest or as transparent as I am. And so that's something that I've had to learn, and something that I've failed at is I've failed a couple of times and being transparent with people, and those people have then come back and bit me on the arse, so to speak, to use that information in a way that it was never intended, or puts me in a position that is then poorly seen. And that's something that I work hard to build trust, and that breaks that trust. And so you learn quite quickly how to make sure that you are trusting the right people. But yeah, one of the tricks I use is to use that. Let me reflect and I come back to you. So I don't let out all of the answers straight away.
I think having that trusting nature, it's really difficult not to be like that, though. I think it's it's really fighting against, I think, actually a good part of your character, which is that's tough, but that's a good tip.
And it goes so much against my grain. Something that I learned at Disney in my very first day at Disney was go that extra mile. Make sure that person leaves happy. And my leadership style is more a servant leadership style. I want to make sure that the people around me are well equipped to do their jobs and to be able to make the right decisions. And that makes me vulnerable to use those skills against me, because I want to give great customer service. If somebody says, how much volume does this do? I want to give a straight, honest answer, not thinking that perhaps that information is sensitive or crucially economically interesting to that person. I have to think about, okay, how is that person going to use that information? Why do they need that information? And what I've had to turn up is that curiosity. So why do you need that information? What story are you trying to tell? And why do you need that information to tell that story? Maybe I can give you different types of information that can still help you with the story, but not give you, that sensitive information.
What's your favorite piece of sports or outdoor gear? and it can't be Columbia. Okay.
Okay. All right then.
That's too easy.
Yeah, I've worked for some very good brands. I've got some great stuff in my wardrobe, but I won't touch any of those brands. As a woman, it's my Sweaty Betty bra. I have a larger chest, and doing sports when you are more well endowed, it can be painful. And so my Sweaty Betty bra is my go-to piece of equipment for my runs, for my skiing, for my hiking, because it holds everything in place, nothing moves, and I don't waste any extra energy moving the ladies around. So so it's probably not one you maybe have had before, but
it's a good one though.
My bra.
Perfect. Great. I love that it's very clear to you as well. That's that shows, I think, how what a good job it's doing.
Yeah, and I think it's again
so top of mind.
Yeah, quite literally. I think it can be something that, again, men don't necessarily see or observe when women get outdoors and do athletics. We have a very different shape and a very different need. And as we start designing for women, and when I joined the industry many years ago, you know, when I very first started at Mamut, we had this sort of shrink it and pink it strategy of just making a men's shirt, but making it in smaller sizes and making it in a female color. They went through a great process to bring in some incredible designers and female-led designers and change that completely. But I think some outdoor industries don't quite get that yet, and that's something that, you know, talking about equality at the table, that goes down to the very products that we make. We need to make equitable products for everybody, no matter what shape, size that they are, whether they're male or female, and we need to look at it through their lens, not through my lens, through their lens.
So what book would you advise somebody to read if they were maybe starting out or already in the industry and, you know, want to have a successful career within the industry?
Yeah, I think there's some great books out there, you know, that other people have mentioned. The one, my Bible, my go-to is The Culture Map by Erin Meyer. It maps out different cultures around the world and where they sit within an easy to understand structure, that some cultures are a handshake and a look in the eye, and that's enough to be able to do business. Other cultures are very much more needs a proper contract with signatures and due diligence and lots of form tickings. How people communicate, you know, using the Dutch as the example, the Dutch are super direct. The Japanese are so indirect, it's unbelievable. Where do I sit within that spectrum, and how do I make sure that what I'm saying and what I'm hearing is the right thing and the right way to engage with the person that sits in front of me? And as an international business, and every business is international now, even the single person on a website in Etsy ships internationally. We need to understand how different cultures react to the world, and to make it easy for those cultures to interact with us, so that we are, you know, providing great customer experience wherever we're touching them. It's my go-to, honestly. It sits in my bag a lot of the time, and especially if I'm visiting a country, I'll pull it out just to refresh my mind about where do people sit on this spectrum, and how do I make sure that I'm showing up in the best way and getting the best out of this interaction from both sides.
What about 3 pieces of advice that you would give to somebody that's really looking to have a successful career within the industry?
Don't self-reject. I think it's something that we're all guilty of. And talking about women especially, women tend to look at a job description and say, I can only do 95% of that job description. I probably shouldn't apply. Don't self-reject. Make sure that you have transferable skills, and look at the job description and understand how the skill that you have could be transferable into the skill that is needed, for sure. But don't self-reject. That's it. It's too hard in life to find great jobs if you are already putting a cross against your name. So don't self-reject. Be brave. One of my favorite quotes is from Eleanor Roosevelt, do one thing every day that scares you. Make that job application. Pick up the phone and ring somebody that you haven't spoken to for a little while. Network. Those are all scary things for me, but I will do them anyway, because if I don't do them, I'll regret not doing them. You always regret the things you don't do. You never regret the things you do. So get out there and be scared. And then the piece of advice I always say to my kids is, doesn't matter what you do in life, so long as you are happy doing it, that's where you belong. So do something that you love, whatever that is, whether that is crocheting, knitting, reading, sewing, being a leader, taking management, doing a podcast, do something that really makes you happy and brings you energy. And though I think those 3 pieces of advice have stood me in good stead. I love getting up in the morning. I love making myself a little scared every day and doing something that's completely out of my comfort zone, but doing it anyway. And just getting out there and going for it. So worst case scenario, they say no. Lost nothing.
So if today was your last day at Columbia, or let's say in the industry, even say that's it, you're hanging up your sports bra and retiring.
Perfect.
What would be your last message to your team?
Go for it. Live for the moment. It's such a pleasure to be able to be surrounded by such incredibly intelligent, motivated people. And as an industry, I think the outdoor industry attracts people that are that type of person. Surround yourself with people that love what they do, and thank you. I owe my career and I owe everything I've learned to almost every single person I've touched through my 30-odd years career, whether that was an intern coming in and showing me something different to, my current boss, Michelle Aubrey, pointing out my strengths and weaknesses and what makes me special. Everybody that I connect with, I've learned something from. So it's a huge thank you to everybody that I've had the pleasure to come into contact with and sit beside.
Perfect. Well, I think that's a perfect place to end. So I want to really thank you, Esther. I think the insights you've provided are amazing. I'm already looking forward to getting the transcript of this and highlighting all of the key takeaways, because there are a lot. So it's been a pleasure to meet you and chat with you today. So thank you very much, and good luck for the coming years and seasons here at Columbia.
Thank you, Dan. It's been a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, please like, subscribe, or leave a comment. Thanks for your support, and see you soon.